In order to overcome nervousness while doing a deed, a devotee can use any of the three steps. But the devotee should not exploit them to overcome nervousness while committing sin. Advaita philosophers claim that they are already God. Such a claim is not necessarily a sin. When the little son of a police officer holds a stick in his hand and says that he is a police officer, the father, who is the police officer, smiles. He feels happy and is not angry with his son. If the son beats a real thief with the stick, the father becomes very happy, saying that his son will certainly become a police officer in the future. But if the son beats an innocent person with the stick, the father becomes angry with his son. He takes away the stick from the son and slaps the son, saying that he will never become a police officer and instead he will become a thief. Hence, a devotee assuming monism with God for doing good deeds is recommendable. Simply assuming monism without doing any deed is also enjoyable fun for God. But assuming monism for doing bad deeds must be avoided. Shankara, in his monistic theory, said that the soul is the absolute truth, or God, and that the world is relatively true with respect to the soul. Through this concept of monism, he was encouraging souls to do good God-like deeds. But the relative truth of the world was misunderstood by some as its non-existence. Yet Shankara kept silent, allowing people to conclude that the world is non-existent. The idea behind his silence was that when the world is said to be non-existent, the follower of monism would at least not have a strong desire to do bad deeds, even if there would be no desire to do good deeds either. Any deed in a non-existing world is also non-existent, like an action done in a dream. A soul doing neither good deeds nor bad deeds would remain more or less inactive, assuming the world to be non-existent. At least such a person would not harm others. Thus Shankara allowed devotees to assume monism to encourage them to do good deeds, and he allowed them to assume the non-existence of the world to at least prevent the soul from doing bad deeds. But he also warned any potential misusers of this concept of monism by saying that the punishment received for one's sins must also be treated as non-existent. To demonstrate this concept, he swiftly ran away to escape from an elephant rushing towards him. When questioned by the followers as to why he was running away from a non-existing elephant, he replied that not only the elephant but also his running away was non-existent. Yatha gajo mithya. On the whole, Shankara preached that the world is non-existent to the real absolute God, while it is existent to every relatively existent soul. The world is not existent to God and not non-existent to the soul. So it can be said to be different from both existence, which is Sat, and non-existence, which is Asat. He called it Mithya, which he defined as different from both existence and non-existence, Sadasat Vilakshana. God is pleased when you use these three steps to overcome your nervousness while doing good deeds. He will be furious only when you exploit these steps to do sins. It is also very important that after ascending from the first step of dualism to the third step of monism, you must also descend back to dualism. There is no harm in continuing to be in the first step of dualism. It is, in fact, better to always continue in the first step. The first step is thinking that one is close to God. Even though an ordinary soul is actually far from God, it's better to think that he or she is close to God. It helps the soul remember that God is watching every deed done by the soul. So every devotee should think that he or she is close to God, which means that God is always closely watching every deed done by the devotee. Some devotees are eager to ascend to the step of monism, but they never want to descend back to dualism. This is very dangerous, since the soul might easily commit sins as a result of continuing to be in monism. The soul begins to think that it is above justice since it is God, and can even commit sins. The Gita says that ascending is done for the sake of doing some action, arurukshoho, and descending is done for the sake of maintaining peace, yoga arudhasya. Devotees should clearly understand that ascending to monism in this context does not mean that the devotee actually has become God. It is only an assumption to overcome nervousness. Even the human incarnation who has actually ascended to the third step has to sometimes come down to lower steps while preaching to devotees. Only when the percentage of ego and jealousy in the devotees around the incarnation is nearly zero does he declare his monism with God. If the devotees have a moderate level of ego and jealousy, he claims to be a son of God, corresponding to the second step. If the ego and jealousy of the devotees is 100%, then the human incarnation only claims to be a messenger of God, which is the first step. It is for this reason that Prophet Muhammad always claimed to be just a messenger of God. Another advantage of remaining in this first step of dualism with God is that there is place for the spiritual effort. Only when the soul realizes that it is different and far from God, that it can take the effort to come closer to God. Of course, there are people who do not want the closeness of God because it makes it inconvenient for them to do sins in the presence of God who is so close. To avoid this inconvenient situation, some such people have placed God beyond this world. Others have denied the very existence of God. As a reaction to these two attempts of pushing God away, some people have developed the concept that God is omnipresent. This omnipresence of God serves the purpose of ensuring a constant closeness of God with every soul. But it also has a disadvantage. There is a danger of thinking that since God is omnipresent, he must also be in the sinner. In that case, it would mean that God is doing the sin. This, of course, is not true. Thinking that God is only beyond creation and thinking that God is omnipresent in creation are two extreme ends. The middle golden path between these two extreme ends is that God is beyond this creation, but he enters creation whenever and wherever there is a justified necessity. The omnipresence of God is not to be taken in the sense of his physical presence everywhere. It is to be understood in an effective sense. It means that even though God is not physically present everywhere, he is effectively present since he knows and controls everything in this creation. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that propagating divine spiritual knowledge pleases the Lord greatly. Jnana yajnena tenaham. Spiritual knowledge brings about permanent harmony and peace in the world. So join us in sharing this universal divine knowledge of Lord Datta and earn the highest grace of God.